I think Gibbs' ability to win 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks really speaks to his ability to play to the strengths of his players. None of those 3 will ever go in the Hall of Fame.
Could you imagine the Miami Shulas or the New England Belichicks? Paul Brown had the Browns named after him. He was the Browns.
Football was a black and white kind of a game. There was no color until Paul Brown.
When you saw a Paul Brown team, it would be Paul Brown, the creator. Something always would be new.
This is the helmet that Paul Brown had designed in 1956, complete with a radio receiver, 4 decades before it was ever used in the NFL.
You thought Dallas Cowboys from 1960 to 1989, you thought Tom Landry.
After nearly a quarter of a century, Tom Landry is still the only head coach the Dallas Cowboys have ever had.
The silhouette shot of him on the sideline, that was the Cowboys' identity.
I don't think there was anything about Coach Landry that you didn't look at him and say, this is the Dallas Cowboys.
He was his own offensive coordinator and his own defensive coordinator. Okay, that's pretty strong.
No, yeah, you can use him pretty much in here. Yeah, you can use him.
He was an innovator. Great football mind.
The man who wore this funny hat fashions some of the NFL's greatest thrills.
The offensive linemen all stood straight up and then went down into the three-point stance. They had the shotgun. They had all of these innovations.
Lineman's breaking outside. See, there's no use to send him out.
Yeah.
Just tell him to slow box, see?
So while all of this glitz was going on around Tom Landry, he was the quiet man in the fedora, the mastermind of the Cowboy experience.
But this wasn't the first time Bill Walsh's offense was challenged by the old guard.
When what is now known as the West Coast offense was being developed, it was summarily dismissed by many people as nothing more than nickel and dime football.
History has shown that these individuals were glaringly mistaken. I agree with that.
He always kind of laughed at the West Coast offense title. He says, it really ought to be the Midwest offense, because it's just the principles that we started in Cincinnati.
It was high percentage throwing, lay the ball off short, let the receiver make the total yardage, the run after the catch.
We began to control the ball through the short pass, always looking for the big play, but going then to the short pass.
Before Chuck was hired, the Steelers were without question the least successful franchise in pro football. Since he was hired, they have been the most successful franchise in pro football. He set the tone and changed the culture for everything that has happened since.
The next year, Noll became head coach in Pittsburgh, where he took over a franchise that had never won a postseason game.
Well, I think when you have a 37-year history of not good, it's going to take a little longer even then to work out of that, because you're always bucking the heritage.
When he was hired, he said, I've been watching the game films, and I can tell you why you've been losing. You could have heard a pin drop in this room. And he said, the reason you've been losing is you're not any good. And I'm going to have to get rid of most of you. And we were, oh my goodness. I would tell you that my job is to teach you how to play this game correctly. I will never give you a motivational speech. If I have to motivate you, I will fire you.
We played the Oilers every year, twice. And once at Three Rivers, someone on the Oilers left a playbook. And the clubhouse guys found and they brought it to Chuck. And in our meeting that we always have on Mondays, Chuck said, this is a playbook for the Houston Oilers. We have another game to play with those guys. And he said, you see this? Dropped it in the trash. And he said, it's not important what they do. The most important thing is what we do.
The significance of the 72 team is pretty apparent, and we've discussed it a little bit, but did you think at the time that all these years later we'd be still talking about it as unique, as the only one to be unbeaten?
No, I really didn't. I mean, we were just, I think the Dolphins were 3-10-1 the year before I got to Miami. And then we went 10-4 the next year and got beat, I think, in the first playoff game. And then, got into the Super Bowl, and then got in and won it the next year, and then won back-to-back Super Bowls. So there was a lot of success early, and it kept getting better, and the team was just a great football team. They're very unselfish. Greasy was the perfect quarterback for that football team, and Zonka, you just pointed him in the right direction.
At this particular time, we're going to try to repeat.
No modern-day NFL team had ever won 3 championships in a row, and Vince Lombardi's attempt at the feat didn't come easy. The Packers were aging and racked with injuries. They looked exhausted.
That's all the timeouts the Green Bay Packers have. They are still inches away from that goal line.
On 3rd down with 16 seconds to go, Lombardi gambled everything on one last play.
Landry would have called a rollout, and a lot of people would have called a rollout.
Watch that star now, come on. Grab him if he fakes it.
Lombardi wanted to run the wedge play. If you can't gain a yard, you don't deserve to be champions.
Here are the Packers. 3rd down, inches to go. To Bader. Starr begins the count. Takes the snap. He's got the quarterback sneak, and he's into the touchdown. And the Green Bay Packers are going to be NFL champions for the 3rd straight year.
In math, in science, formula. There's one in the NFL, truly one that works every time. And it worked again yesterday. And the great thing with formulas, your star in the formula doesn't have to play particularly well for big parts of the game. New England's wide receivers had 6 drops. They missed a PAT. Couldn't get the onside field goal right. Offensive line was dominated for most of it. But it doesn't really matter. When you rely on each other, it is a community that's smarter and more thoughtful, never paralyzed by one dude. Do your job. Next man up. I know, it doesn't sell on the marquee, but start looking around, especially in sports. And from UConn women's basketball to New England to Theo Epstein, it is what is dominating.